just concluded that she had died, that she had been killed the 14th or the 16th, and he was under surveillance since February 4th, could not have been him. Now, how her DNA was found in his property, who knows what kind of excuse he might have come up with, but the point is forensic entomology actually proved that this guy did not do it. But there's more to the story than that. When they took into account the weather, which was hot and dry, and the blowflies, they just weren't around the first week or so, first couple of weeks, because the weather was too hot and dry for them. They didn't notice the dead body, or they weren't able to get to it. It was too hot and dry, whatever it might have been. When it was hot and dry, the blowflies do not work. So, because of that, the blowflies, it's true that the blowflies were only there the 14th and 16th. That's when the blowflies found her. But that does not mean that she was killed the 14th and 16th. The blowflies only found her the 14th and the 16th because they were waiting 2 weeks for the hot and dry spell to end. Really, she had been killed, let's say, 2 weeks before the 14th, on February 1st or so, or February 2nd. That is well before the surveillance. So because of the weather, this forensic evidence could not be used to prove that he was innocent. So because of that, the suspect was eventually sentenced to death. He had no alibi. The blowflies could not give him an alibi because the blowflies were late. 2 weeks, they were too hot and dry, so the blowflies could not be his alibi. You see how interesting how these things go. Using blowflies as evidence to exonerate, but then again, the blowflies could not be used. So this gives us about a month or so after death to find how long ago the person died. What about the stage of years? What if there are only bones around? Well, the last thing to go are the bones and the teeth after decomposing. This is usually found by, police don't really search for that long. They give up after a while. Usually citizens stumble all across the body after a long time afterwards. Once they stumble across and they notify the police, the tomb site becomes a crime scene. And it's got to be analyzed with the sketches, the photographs, the notes, and whatever you need. Let's get to crime scene now. And in this case, they use ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors. I mean, the person might have, maybe a bullet was used, and there are bullets left in the ground for years. So you might want metal detectors. So from the bones, you can tell a lot of things. Maybe not a lot, maybe not that much, but you can tell a lot. One of the important things they can tell is whether the dead body is male or female. One of the easiest way to tell from the bones is the hip bones. These are pretty thick, strong bones, so they last a long time. The male has, the hip bones, they join at the beginning with this connecting tissue. This connecting tissue, or connecting cartilage, or bone, or whatever that is, and it's thick and tall and high. Also, this area here it's closer together. It's formed like a V. For a female, it doesn't look like that. These things are very long here. See, this is kind of short comparatively, and long, short. It's not here. It's short. The width is we're going from side to side. It's short, and top and bottom is actually large. For the female, it is long from side to side, and not so long from top to bottom over here. So you can tell. You can tell by the way it looks whether it's a male or a female. You can tell the gender of the dead body, a male or female, based on these hip bones. Okay? Now, the reason why that the male and female bodies are different is that the female body's got to have wide apart hip bones so the baby can be squeezed through. See, the male doesn't need that. The male doesn't carry the baby, so the male does not need to squeeze it through. So the hip bones are a little narrower over here. The women, the female human, or women if you want to call it that, they have to have a wide apart pelvic bones over here, so the baby can be squeezed through. That's why this thing is wide, and because it's wide, this thing is not so long from top to bottom. This, by the way, is one of the reasons, this is the main reason why women are often depicted as having wide hips. They got to have them. It comes from these bones, and they have to have them in order to get the baby out. You can also tell the age of the dead body. Children from the bones. The children, first of all, they have smaller bones, but besides that, That means you can tell that it's a child's. The age of the body it was a low age. It was the age of children. The bones are smaller, but also children have more bones and there's more cartilage between the bones. There's a lot more space between the bones. Adults have less. As a person grows older, the bones grow into each other. They fuse. They grow into each other. It's one of the reasons that adults are a little bit stronger than children. It's not the main reason, but it's one of the reasons. They're tighter, and there are fewer bones because the bones grow into each other. So two separate bones may grow into each other. It becomes one bone. So it's true. Adults have fewer bones than children. Also, the cartilage in between the bones, again, it fades as the bones grow closer into each other. That happens near the joints. So children have more, adults have less. So you can tell whether the bone is of a child or an adult. Also, you can tell by the size of the bone, let's say the femur, let's say the thigh bone, or the humerus, let's say the arm bone. You can tell by this how tall the person was. And it's pretty good. You can get within 5 centimeters. However, it's not as easy as you might think because it does depend on the race and the gender. Males and females might have a different ratio of femur to total height. Also, different races might have a different ratio between the femur, the thigh bone, and the total height. So once you know the race or the gender, then you know whether then you can pretty much figure out how tall the person was. And sometimes it's very important. If the person might have been a midget, the person might have been very tall, he might have been able to reach certain things, whatever it might be, we can find out a little bit about the dead body just from the bone. Or even more importantly, you might be able to find the identity. Let's say a really tall person was found missing, and this person has a large enough femur, you can actually possibly identify the person based on the size of the bone. The thing about race is it's not always that clear-cut. There's racial mixing, especially along the borders of where the certain race was. The general races are the Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. I think they're also called Africoid, but let's call them Negroid for now, just because I think that's what the book used. Anyway, the Caucasoid's like the Caucasians, Caucasoid. And the Mongoloid, those are the Mongoloid, that refers to, we kind of know them as like people from the Far East, like China, Japan, places around there. And Negroid, those are people from Africa. Central Africa or so. But of course, let's say Mongoloid. Toward the edges of China, let's say around the Russian border, there's some kind of mixing in between. So they're not exactly all that Mongoloid. There might be sort of Caucasoid, because I think Russians are more Caucasoid. So you find some kind of mixing, and the Russians are there, not all that Caucasoid, partly Mongoloid. And similar to the place near the Negroids and let's say the Caucasoids or whatever. Anyway, you can sometimes tell, but again, sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes because race is fluid, there is mixing. But sometimes, like in central China, deep in central China, let's say, might have only Mongoloids, and they might not have seen any Caucasoids or Negroids except for television programs. In these cases, the race is pretty pure, and you can tell a lot more. But you can tell a little bit. The Caucasoids have oval eye orbitals. These are the skull holes for the eyes. The nasal cavity is long and narrow. And you can read about these, but I'm not putting much stock in them because, first of all, I don't like talking about race, and second of all, as I said, it's kind of fluid. But these are various characteristics of different